Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 342. Today we're going to talk about why can't we be friends. This is the first Empire pack for Imperial Settlers. Now, Imperial Settlers is a civilization themed card game, and what this does is add a few cards to each of the different factions as well as the common deck of cards, and introduces a few new mechanics. Now I'm in the middle of reviewing 3 different civilization themed games. Frankly, the last year or so has had a lot of good civilization themed games, and I think it's kind of been something that people have wanted for a long time. This is really an excellent civilization themed card game, which makes it unique. But let's go ahead and jump into some of the cards for the factions and explain how I think they kind of changed the game up. So going along with the theme of why can't we be friends, there is sort of a playfulness with this expansion. Frankly, there's a playfulness with this game, which is very cool. But let's talk about how these cards will change the game. First, we'll take a look at the common cards that you add to the common deck. Now, right off the bat, is probably the only card I really don't like in this expansion. There's only one of these. It's an instant card. And you play this, and basically you blow up somebody's building from play, either a common building, or you can actually spend some of your swords to blow up one of their main buildings. So it's kind of odd. It's just a one-off. You know, there's only one of these in the game, and it kind of feels like if it was a volcano, I wouldn't be able to take hold of it and actually use it against somebody. But it's fine. It's not the end of the world. It's really the only card I don't like in the game. So moving into some of the more fun common cards, first we can see here's the wood market. And the first thing to note about this is the open production banner at the top. Now there's several new cards in here that have this open production idea. If we take a closer look at what the wood market does, you can see it's got open production for 1 wood and then a building bonus of 1 worker. So of course when you build this, you get a worker, and then you immediately get a wood, and then on future production phases you'll also get a wood. But other players can actually take and put one of their workers on this building and then get a wood. So the way these open production buildings work is up to 2 other workers can go on to somebody else's open production building, and so they'll get that production. But then what you'll do, let's say I had put this wood market out there, then I will get a worker from the supply into my general supply, so I can go ahead and use that. So another example of this, which I really like, is the Damascus Steel Armorer. You can actually see this already has an armor token on it, so it's going to cost an extra sword to raise. But this one has an open production of 1 sword. So just looking at this one right away, it's very interesting. So it's kind of like the arms dealer of Imperial Settlers, and it only costs you 1 worker. So if I take that worker, it's very tempting for me to go in and try to get that extra weaponry for myself. So you can definitely put it out there. Yeah, you're going to be kind of seeding the board with, you know, more weapons, but you're going to be getting some of those workers. So there's very much a temptation factor with these cards. So the next common card to look at here is Emma the Witch. And this has sort of a counteract to the open production. So each time you send a worker to an open production, its owner doesn't actually receive a worker from the general supply. And this one has a little bit of the whimsy I was talking about. I mean, it's a civilization game, but it has a witch character here. It has a fun little element to the game. Next, we're going to take a look at some depots. The first one is a stone depot, and these are new mechanics in the game where these will actually produce for you victory points based on the amount of stored goods. So if you remember, in the base game you can only store a certain type of good based on your faction, but you can store extra goods on these. And here we can see the meat depot, and you'll get some residual points for storing some of your excess on these different depot cards. Now we'll go ahead and move into the barbarian faction, and I am loosely doing these in order of my preference. So keeping with that theme of a depot, you can actually get points for stored swords on here. And interesting to note, with all of these storage cards, you have a maximum of 3 points, but you can store as many of that type as you want. So normally the barbarians can only store workers, but now you've got a little extra spot where you can store swords from round to round and also get some points. And here's another interesting card for the barbarians. These are mounted scouts. This gives us another thing to do something with our sword. So we can spend a worker on a sword and then draw 2 more cards for them. Next, we've got an open production here, and again, this is very simple. You get a wood, but the building bonus in this case is more tempting for the barbarian player because they can get an immediate sword and a worker. Finally, the last card I'll talk about with the barbarians is this elite, and it's similar to the other depots, but it works a little bit differently. You can see you score 1 victory point for each card under this, but when you raise a card from your hand, you can instead put it under here instead of discarding it. Next, we'll move into the Japanese cards, and this is an interesting card here, Daimo's Guards. And what this allows you to actually use samurai to protect your common buildings, because remember, you can only protect your faction buildings, but it also gives you a building bonus of 2 samurai to put out immediately, which is nice. Next is a nice little card. You can spend a worker here to name a color and then draw common cards until you find that color. Of course, that's nice if you're looking for possibly a type of good that you might need to go good with your hand. And here's one of the Japanese open production cards. It gets the ever elusive food out on the board, and then it gives an immediate building bonus of 2 workers, which could be used as samurai for the Japanese. And here's some more card draw for the Japanese Kenji's Raiders. You draw cards equal to the number of samurai you have. You keep 1, but then you have to give 1 to your enemy. So now we're starting to get into my 2 favorite factions. First, we're going to look at Egypt. And here's another kind of depot card, where you gain goods of the same number and type as those stored on this card, but then you can actually store those again at the end of the round, so it's a nice place to store some of your excess. And this one I really like. It's cheap to build, and when you build it, you choose one of your deals and you get those goods right away. And then again, during the production phase, you basically get to double up on one of your deals. Now here's a very enticing open production building. This one is actually free to build, so very, very cheap to build. Now it's going to produce for you a gold piece, a wild resource, and it gives a wild resource to everybody else, but this is going to be very tempting for people to come and use. Now finally we have the Barbarian, and these have some very interesting cards for the Barbarian. So here's a loading point. It's open production again, but you get a building bonus of 2 stone, and again you also get the production from the stone itself. And so the Romans, everybody knows they always want to generate a bunch of stone, get a lot of buildings out. And what are they going to do with that stone? Well, here's Hadrian's Wall. You can actually spend a stone to move one of your common buildings over to your faction side, and then that makes it so it can't be raised by your opponent. And some more things to do with your excess stone is you actually spend stone as an action to gain a wild resource. And you actually do this twice on a turn. And keeping with the friendly theme, you can actually spend a worker here at the Roman embassy, choose one of the enemy production buildings, and gain the goods it provides. And finally, we have the cohort, where you can spend one of our workers to choose a common card from our hand and just lay it face down as a foundation. And that card's very interesting because a lot of times you want to get a building out, a common building, you don't really care what it does, you just want to convert it into one of your empire buildings. So that's pretty interesting to have. Now, what do I think of this? Well, there's a few ways you can deck build. The rules say you can just shuffle in the new cards and play with those. But the way it also says to deck build is, let's say you have a card that is marked as there's 3 of these in the deck. Well, you pull all 3 of those out, and then you take like that loading point card that generates a lot of stone for the Romans, and there's 3 of those, so you replace that with all 3 copies of that. And if there's a card there's only 1 of, you just take that out, and then you put another card in that there's only 1 of. So the distribution and everything and the count's going to remain the same, about 30 cards. So I think that's a good idea. Now what I've done is taken out like all of the nasty cards and then phased in all of the new cards just to kind of play with them, and you get a more frequency of those. And it has changed the game up quite a bit. I think I'm going to kind of stick with that for now. The first couple games I played of this, I tried just shuffling everything together and like didn't really feel that much different. And, you know, you didn't get access to the cards. So I went through and kind of pulled out some of the more nasty attack ones, because the box does say, why can't we be friends? That doesn't make the game, you know, remove the attacks at all. It just kind of softens it up a little bit. And you can see there kind of with the Japanese and the barbarians, it gives you some other things to do, you know, besides just spend, you know, attacking. And the open production is very interesting. That kind of helps a little bit. But beyond just the open production, there are other ways that you, like I said, you can remove a little bit of the nastiness. So if you didn't like that part of the game, you can do that. So at the end of the day, I want there to be like a lot of these, because I really actually agonized over the deck building process. Now I kind of went in it with a certain mindset, but as I was doing that, I could see like other little combos just from the 10 cards per faction. I was like, oh wow, if I had this, I could do this, but okay, I'm just trying to make it a little bit nicer. So that's kind of the attitude I took. And I did like it when I played it that way. So I could just see, you know, like 10 more for each faction. And I would be like, wow, there's so many different interesting possibilities that you could have here. So I'd like to see more of it. I know I'd like to see other factions and things, and I think that's going to keep the game interesting, and you can kind of see maybe these factions sort of evolve over time as different packs are added to it. So anyway, I would say if you like Imperial Settlers, it's a no-brainer. It's a small little pack. It's, you know, it's affordable and everything. So definitely take a look at it. But I definitely, you know, I want to see more. It's kind of becoming like an LCG at this point. So that would be awesome if it did that. I mean, this is frankly better than most of the LCGs I played. So anyway, there you go. Definitely take a look at it. Thanks.